with a brand new video. Now, I know that many of you know me from Patrick's ASMR's video. It doesn't work because it's Patrick's ASMR, right? So it's possessive, right? So it's Patrick's ASMR, but then when he does a video, it's Patrick's ASMR's video. It just sounds weird anyways. Not the point. The point is, I know why you guys are here. I'm not stupid, okay? I know you think I am, but I know, okay? But many of you liked my segment in that video where I covered different types of Nintendo controllers, which was cool. I liked that you guys liked it. It'd be weird if you came here if you hated it, but anyways, a lot of you guys liked that segment, which makes me happy. And because of that, I have now surpassed 100 subscribers, which I'm very happy about. And so in honor of that, I will be hosting a Q&A. This is assuming that I get enough questions. Maybe I won't. Maybe, like, no one's gonna care, and I'll get none, and in that case, I just will make one. But if I get enough questions, I will make a Q&A. That being said, in honor of people coming here, I will be making a remake of my segment in Patrick's ASMR's video, where I do a bit of more in-depth discussion of different Nintendo controllers. This idea did not come to me all on my own, though. I would like to thank Gabriella for giving me this idea. Thank you, Gabrielle. I guess I already did it, but I guess you get it again. Thank you, Gabrielle, for giving me this idea. So, what will this remake be? Well, obviously a more comprehensive history. I said that. If you didn't hear that, you're a bad listener. But not only will it even go a little bit more in depth, I will also be extending the history just a little bit. Instead of going from 1985 to 2007, I will be going from 1985 to 2017. So, in layman's terms, instead of going from the Nintendo Entertainment System to the Wii, I will be going from the Nintendo Entertainment System. Sorry, the camera's messing me up. I will be going from the Nintendo Entertainment System to the Nintendo Switch. Alright, let's get started. Starting off, we have the NES controller. This was the first standardized controller Nintendo would ever make. Nintendo had made games like Donkey Kong and Super Mario Bros. In the past, but those were arcade machines, and for those, the controllers were designed specifically for the game. In this case, this was a standardized controller that multiple games could be run on. Now, a lot of controllers at the time had some sort of gimmick. Games like consoles like the Commodore, for example, would end up using a keyboard that was its general control style. And while it sort of worked, it made things very realistically, they shouldn't have a designated purpose. You see, the first game, I believe the first game to ever be released on the NES was Super Mario Bros. And the major thing they could have done, they could have easily done this, they could have labeled the buttons as jump and fire. They went against that idea and made it A and B. Yes, I got that right. A and B. And they went with that because that is very general. It's general. So, for example, for a game like The Legend of Zelda, if I'm correct, I haven't played that game in a long time. A would be A would be like your do button. That's what you would use to do stuff. And B would be your attack. It worked out for that game. I'm drawing a blank here. I've played surprisingly not amount of NES games. Well, in the end, actually the A button would kind of become the standardized jump button. But that kind of happens with a lot of consoles, right? Even today. Like, if somebody made a button other than A or B on a controller, jump, that is generally considered unorthodox. Those are the buttons that are used to jump, so that's kind of what they want you to stick with. But for a lot of top-down games, these were just simply action buttons. You would use these to do actions. And at the same time, because you had two of them for side-scrolling games, you could even have more options. So, you could have like A and B. These could be action buttons. And then you could press down, and then press P to access a menu. Except wait, you wouldn't do that, because in another great move, they added two menu buttons. For a long time on controllers, menu buttons weren't exactly a thing. You would have a button that would pause the game, but sometimes it would have to take up either A, its only action button, or B, a random button that, like, you wouldn't exactly expect to pause it. But here, you have the start button. These are menu buttons, they are out of the way. You don't really think much about it. You don't really even, they are designed in such a way that when you look at them, you don't really see them as like part of the main design. You just see them and you go, oh, those are two small buttons. But if you want to pause the game, well, you've been using this for a long time, and these as well. I want to pause the game. Why don't I try these two buttons? And bam. Now the game is paused. Why is my... Now the game is paused. And it works out. Now, this controller did have a few hiccups, although this was sort of just the time. So, for example, in a menu, you couldn't press up and down to access things. You had to press select to select your options and then start to choose it. It was weird, but that's how it was done. And that kind of just became standardized. Now, if there is one flaw with this controller, it's that it's kind of too basic, to the point that it is literally just a rectangle. This isn't a super big problem, except it's not super comfortable to hold. It's not super ergonomic, and it is really hard to control. It's really hard to hold after a few hours of playing, because the sides dig into your hands just a little bit. It's not a massive problem, and for the time, it was very good, but it could be improved on. And so they did. Say goodbye to the NES controller. Bye-bye, NES controller. Bye. SNES controller. SNES controller, which stands for Super Nintendo Entertainment System. This is the SNES controller. Now, this controller is obviously different, but it's actually quite similar. They kept a lot of the parts that worked. They were pretty much all the parts that worked. They kept the D-pad. The D-pad is a perfect way of conveying, hey, this is how you move. And they kept the face buttons to the right. If you're familiar with the NES controller, it looks about the same, but just a little bit different. Now, the thing they kind of just did was they kept it exactly the same, but they just added more buttons. Now, at the time, adding more buttons kind of just meant adding them haphazardly all over the controller, and it was kind of like, oh, more buttons are better, and it's like, well, yeah, if they're placed properly, but if they're just all over, it doesn't really work. These buttons are placed very well. Now, they decided to go with 4 face buttons, so they kept the A and B buttons, while also adding X and Y buttons. I think it would have been better to add Y and Z buttons, because you have A and B, and then you have Y and Z, but whatever, they chose X and Y. I'm not gonna question it. No, I don't know. I don't know why they did that. But the way they structured this was actually very smart. They could have easily just gone with doing all the buttons next to each other and going, you figure it out. But instead, they put them diagonal to each other. So what this means is, you can access the buttons from wherever you are in the controller. For example, for Super Mario World, you kind of always want to be able to hit B. That is very important in the game. Hitting B. Because B is your jump button. So, they make Y your attack button. So, if you're holding the controller like this, you can press Y and jump like that. Y is also your run button, so you can hold Y and jump. A is your attack button. It's kind of an attack that isn't really used that often, and so, because of that, doing this is pretty easy to just I'm doing a bad job when I'm holding it like this, but I'm doing a terrible job, but it's pretty easy to just move your thumb and press that, if you need to. And last but not least, you have the X button, which I'm pretty sure spawns in your item. You can hold an item in there. Basically, it is an action that is not done very often. You don't need to use this action a lot. It's the most out of the way. And so, it's reasonable to expect you to have to move a little bit more to hit it. Wherever you are on the controller, it is easy enough to access all the buttons. Start and select. Start and select. Start and select are kept in generally the same places. They are diagonal, but that's not super weird. They also added 2 more buttons. L and R. L and R. L and R. L and R. These are good buttons because they were able to add 6 buttons in total. We'll have 6 action buttons and have them all easily accessible. Because since you hold the controller like this, you can hit these at any time. And it works out kind of perfectly. They also updated the ergonomics. So, they got their stuff together, and they made a controller that was made purely for 3D games. After this, Nintendo would create their, to the modern eye, their strangest looking controller yet. The Nintendo 64 controller. Now, a lot of people give this game crap, or give this controller crap, and for good reason, admittedly. It does have some design issues, 100%. But it's also important to understand it in the context of the day. But before we get into that, I would like to explain what they did with this controller. They took the general design of the SNES controller. As you can see, it's kind of laid out right here. The general design of it. And kind of just went crazy with it. So, first off, they added 2 prongs to the side for more ergonomic ability. So it's easier to hold. Now they kept the 4-button design right there. And they kept the 2 action buttons. The major change that they made was they took away the select button and you only have a start button now. But they also had to appeal to 3D games with this controller. And so, they added an extra prong in the middle for 3D games. And because of that, they added more buttons and they changed some stuff. Number 1, these are no longer X, A, B, and Y. They are now the C buttons. So, C up, C left, C down, and C right. For 3D games, they added the A and B buttons, and these would become camera controls. This is not entirely standard, and in the end, most 2D games would just end up using these anyways, but it seems to be the original purpose. For 3D games, they added a full analog stick. This was meant to give you full 3D movement. So, with the PlayStation, you would only have a directional pad, which would essentially mean that you were limited to 8 directions, even in 3D games. While with this, you were given a full 360-degree field of movement. At the same time, because many games would have to be played like this, they wanted to make sure that you would have a button on your left side as well. So, on the back of the controller, they added the C button. The C button. Now, for the criticism of this controller, the major thing, and this is something that I praise the NES and SNES controllers for, which is that you can't access everything just by holding it. You have to. There are 3 standard ways of holding it. The most common way was like this. For 2D games, you would hold it like this. And for first-person shooters, a lot of games chose to have you hold the controller like this. So in other words, you can't access every button just by holding the controller, which sounds like a bad design at first, but you need to think about it from the time. At the time, So, this was the perfect way of gradually introducing players into the new world of 3D by giving them a strange but concise and effective way of holding the controller. It ended up working very well. The Nintendo 64 ended up not selling super well, but that was because of like advertisement issues and like developer RAM and like problems with the system, not the controller. With that being said, in 1998, 7, I forget, but Sony would release the DualShock controller, which would be just the original design for the PlayStation controller, but with 2 extra analog sticks. And unlike the Nintendo 64 controller, you could access every button and stick at once, just by holding it in one way. So Nintendo would soon figure out that this controller was obsolete. However, they did not truly give up the full design philosophy of it. And their next controller would carry on a lot of similar design choices that they chose for it. The next controller, released in 2001, I've actually been skipping the years. I'll get you up to speed. Nintendo Entertainment System, 1985. Super Nintendo Entertainment System, 1990. Nintendo 64, 1996. Okay, now we're got up to speed. In 2001, Nintendo would release the GameCube controller. At a glance, you can see its similarities, but you can tell that it's very different. So first off, let's look at what design philosophies carried over. Number 1, the A and B buttons are still the star of the show. In fact, they are still the only 2 action buttons that are uniquely covered or colored. The X and Y buttons, which are now a newly 3D added thing, are the same color and simply surround the A buttons. They seem more like menu buttons than anything. The C button has been moved from being a more vocal trigger to being a simple side menu button. The L and R buttons are now the star of the show. Or stars, I guess. A major difference that they've added with these buttons is now they are analog buttons. What does this mean? Well, it means that the further that it knows how far you're pressing them down, and once you click, that's all the way down. This gave designers a lot of options. For example, in Super Mario Sunshine, you could hold down the R button slightly to make Mario use the machine that he has on his back, and still be able to move around. However, if you press it all the way down, he would stop, and this would now turn into an aiming button. This gave developers more design options, and would give players more room to kind of mess around and see what would happen with different options. The C buttons have now been turned into a dedicated stick. It is now its own stick. Now, at this time, full, analog camera movement was a little bit behind the times. Games like Super Mario Sunshine would have it, but a lot of games ended up just not using this stick. this isn't just for the Nintendo controller, this went for a lot of games. The D-pad is still here, but it obviously takes a major backseat. It is small, a little bit cumbersome to use, and seems a lot more like a menu button than anything else. And lastly, we have the analog stick. It's still about exactly the same, except it has these very prominent indents. So, in case you want to point your character directly up, it's easier to do that. They've also now changed the start button to say start/pause, so people know that's what you use to pause the game. Now, as good as this controller is, it does have some problems. Number one, putting the Y and X buttons at the side kind of forced developers to have to only work with the A and B buttons. Y and X could not be major action buttons. They essentially had to be menu or side action buttons. Also, only adding this C button at the side made this side completely vacant and meant that essentially you had a weird looking design for the controller. It already does look weird, but for the most part, looking at the basic shape of it, it's all concise until you get up here. This controller has some problems, and I would say that as much as I enjoy it, and I have many good memories with it, I can also say that it is definitely probably the lesser out of all the controllers here. So, when Nintendo would make their next console, they would pretty much ditch everything they've done up until this point and kind of start over and go into a new direction. Going from that design and seeing how complex the controllers have gotten over the years, you'd probably be shocked to see that their next controller was this, the Wii Remote. Some people call it the Wiimote. It kind of depends on who you ask. This controller comes with two ideas in mind. You can hold the controller like this, or you can hold it like this. Holding it like this gives it a bit more of an NES style feel. Almost exactly. You have your D-pad, your 1 and 2 buttons, which basically act as your A and B buttons, start and select, and I guess alt and an extra button for good measure. They've also added a home button. This did nothing for games, it was simply a menu button. As you can probably guess, this controller was not great for 3D games, and in fact, most 3D games would choose to ditch this. So then how would you play 3D games? Well, there is a port at the bottom, which would allow extensions to be plugged in. One of these was the nunchuck. This would add an analog stick and two other action buttons, specifically the C and Z buttons. This definitely did help improve it, and it did make it feel a lot more like a controller. There are some problems with this though. It is lacking a second analog stick, which meant that they usually had to resort to this being your camera button. Not exactly the best option, but it's what we had to work with. Oh, there's also a B button, I forgot to mention that. There's also a B button on the back. This was generally not used when you're holding it like this though, so it's fine. However, this was done for a very good reason. When you hold a controller like this, there is a major component that is to this that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is the fact that you can move it, and the console knows that you're moving it. It has motion controls, which means that you can swing it like a bat, and it will swing your bat in the game. Now, this was done to appeal to a more casual market. It's obviously hard to expect people who have never touched a game system before to just get a whole bunch of buttons. But swing the Wii Remote, that's pretty simple. People can get that. And because of this, they could also implement this into more hardcore games, like The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess and The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. They were able to make it work. Now, while it did help to appeal to the casual market, there were a few problems. Number one, it kind of limited their options when it came to more hardcore games. They had to make sure that everything would fit onto here, and while it did end up working out for the most part, it did prove to be a problem. Now, despite this, it did end up selling super well. However, in a lot of hardcore markets, it was a hard sell because, well, it's an odd design, and a lot of developers would end up choosing to either A, make their own exclusive, to make Wii exclusive versions, or make the quality of their Universal games down lower in order to make games work better with the Wii. It was a solution that worked for no one. So, with their next console, they would go back to a more standard design. The next controller Nintendo would release would be the Wii U Gamepad. I know, it's a lot. It is a lot. This has an almost extremely basic design to it. This is basically a default controller layout like the Xbox or PlayStation, except you have a giant screen in the middle. One of the things that they did was they added back C buttons, but now you have two CL and CR, as well as L and R buttons. They also brought back the standard A, B, Y, and X format. And of course the biggest draw, the screen. The idea was that you would use the screen and your TV at the same time, and it worked very well for a lot of games. However, it's also a very large controller and a little bit clunky to handle. It also doesn't really provide anything unique if you're not familiarized with gaming at all. It's a little bit hard to understand. While as gaming gets more complicated, you could argue that even with a controller like the Nintendo 64 controller, it would be hard to grasp. It was clear that it knew how to introduce even returning players to its same style. This is just a little bit clunky. As much as I love it, it's clunky. As a result, the Wii U is Nintendo's worst selling home console. And because of this, they really had to hit it out of the park with their next controller design. Next up, by the way, that was released in 2012. I forgot to say it. And the Wii was released in 2007. I don't know if I said that. And the Wii U was released in 2012. Next up, in 2017, we got the Nintendo Switch. This controller, on paper, looks a little odd. It looks like a standard controller, but with a few weird quirks. First of all, while you can definitely hold the controller like this, it feels weird and a little stiff. The D-pad has also been changed to 4 individual buttons, and instead of everything being diagonal to each other for a more ergonomic feel, it is instead straight down. The question may be, why did they choose to do that? And I will now show you why they chose to go with this design. These are the Joy-Cons. They are 2 separate controllers that can either be used by themselves or as one. For a simpler look, let's look at them by themselves. A Joy-Con by itself can be turned to the side. With this, you have a joystick, 4 face buttons, a menu button, and 2 triggers. It's almost like an SNES controller with one less menu button. This idea was created out of a want for multiplayer. If you buy a Nintendo Switch, you get 2 separate controllers. But while they could have just gone with the one and released it like that, it would be a very Nintendo thing to do. With the 2, you get 1 singular controller, 2 analog sticks, 4 face buttons, 1 D-pad, and 4 top buttons, along with 2 menu buttons. They also added, to remember your memories with, a photo button, which allows you to take pictures. However, this is not the end of this. This isn't just a home console. This is also a portable system. You might be wondering how. This is the Nintendo Switch. And the way to make it portable is by doing this. Now it is a portable system. This works extremely well and is probably their best controller yet. These still have motion elements, which means that you can still use them to swing bats and stuff, but they're also very standard, which means that there's no weird thing where developers have to plan around it. It already works. And if you want a more standard design, there is the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. It's the same basic design, but more ergonomic, and is generally better for home console play, as well as featuring same motion elements. is it for this. I hope you've enjoyed this more extended look